Thank you very much indeed. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting in about 2 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Please take your seats. We'll be starting in just 2 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Please take your seats. This session is about to begin. Remember, this session is part of sub-theme 2. Remember what sub-theme 2 is looking at: nature-based solutions from forests, and specifically here for climate change, mitigation, and adaptation in NDCs. Good morning to you. I'm Henry Bonsu. I'm a Ghanaian, born and raised in the UK, but as my Ghanaian brother here, who'll be speaking shortly, will attest, I'm still deep down a Ghanaian from motherland Ghana. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back here in the Republic of Korea. My third time here, as I've been telling people, and I'm very, very impressed with the government's commitment to combating climate change in so many different ways. And that's what's brought me back yet again, so I'm delighted to be here. So think about what we're discussing this morning: the potential of forest conservation, sustainable use and restoration as nature-based solutions that support climate change mitigation and adaptation and provide human well-being, biodiversity, and ecosystem benefits. Here's how the session is going to run. We've got 3 keynote presentations, 2 from speakers here in the room, and they are from the Arab Republic of Egypt. We're delighted to have the CEO of the Environmental Affairs Agency, the Ministry of the Environment. Remember, Egypt is going to be president of COP27, so it's taken on the baton from Glasgow and will be taking us through later this year. So that's Ali Abosena. Then we'll hear from Hyun Kim, Ambassador and Deputy Minister for Climate Change, the Republic of Korea. So they are both here in the front row and delighted to see you. And then we'll have a virtual presentation from Pablo Vieira, Global Director, NDC Partnership, that's Finance for NDC. So those 3 presentations will be setting the scene and giving us a sense of where we are with this particular discussion as applied to Egypt, Korea, and then the NDC Partnership. Then we'll move to a panel discussion, and we have representatives from Ghana, from Ecuador, from Colombia as well. Let's have a look. And also, Alexandra, you are both French and Italian. I'm going to call you Italian because you work for FAO in Rome. So we will then get a very fluid discussion going. And you, if you have questions, maybe inspired by what you've heard, you may be able to take part in a Q&A. We have microphones placed here and there, so you'll be able to ask a question. And then we'll also hear from young Jessica Vega Ortega, a Global Indigenous Youth Caucus co-chair, because time and again, young people say we have a lot of ideas and energy, we're marginalized, we're not being listened to. Well, not today, we're gonna hear from you. And then we'll get closing remarks from our keynote speakers. So that's how things are going to run this morning. Are you ready? I think some of you are still asleep. Are you ready to discuss this? Do you believe you can change things? Say, yes, we can. Fantastic. Right, okay. So to discuss the role of nature-based solutions in enhancing climate ambition for both, remember, adaptation and mitigation from the perspective of the incoming COP27 presidency, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Ali Abosena the Chief Executive of the Environmental Affairs Agency in the Ministry of the Environment for the Arab Republic of Egypt, to come and make some opening remarks. Sir, please.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting us for this very important session. So, ladies and gentlemen, 2020 is an important year of accelerating and delivering forest pledges in order to meet the Paris Agreement goals of reducing deforestation and forest degradation. The Galaxy Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use, signed by 141 states, is the most recent call for action and solid reinforcement of countries' pledges. The declaration reaffirms that halting deforestation necessitates to coordinate effort from local to global levels, as well as from within the outside the forest sector, including agriculture and food system transformation, as well as safeguarding and promoting sustainable and legal supply chains. Climate change, along with biodiversity loss, is one of the most significant challenges we face right now. The enormity of the Earth's sixth mass extinction is highlighted in the IPCC and IPEC global assessment, which highlight the large and diverse spectrum of climate change effects projected on our society and the ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, furthermore, climate and biodiversity are intertwined. Climate change has impact on over 80% of biological process, and natural-based solution can supply approximately 40% of the mitigation needed to fulfill the 2 Celsius Paris Agreement goal. Natural-based solutions are measured that are taken to maintain, sustainably manage, and restore ecosystem in order to address social issues as well as biodiversity conservation. They are adaptive and flexible, as well as cost-effective, and this is most important, and beneficial in various ways, in visual ways. So, ecological restoration, ecological engineering, ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based mitigation, and ecosystem-based catastrophe risk reduction, for example, is very important. Ladies and gentlemen, the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, have highlighted the notion of natural-based options during 2009 conference on the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, in Copenhagen, where forests were proposed as one of the solutions for climate mitigation through the REDD program, reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. As a result, one of the three axes of the IUCN's goal program in 2013 was to develop program to promote develop and promote natural-based solution. The Paris Agreement recognized the importance of natural-based solution in 2015. The IUCN General Assembly endorsed a recommendation specifying 9 natural-based solutions and the other encouraging states to importance of the natural-based solution and put it into their climate change strategy in 2016. During the IUCN World Conservation Congress, this was really highlighted. Our role to work on the natural-based solution, which made up of 3 different sorts of acts that can integrate it within a certain territory. The first one, maintaining functional ecosystem in good ecological condition, enhancing ecosystem management for long-term human use, and restoring or developing ecosystems. I will just try to highlight this importance of natural-based solution and how this will be most linked to our COP27 that Egypt is hosting. This will be a priority for us, and this is what we planning to have in our meetings, a special focus on the forests, how we can restore and maintain, and the most important issue, how to commit to the financial pledges that have been committed before and to ensure it is really achieved and it is in the ground. So this will be one of the top priority that will be taken into consideration during the COP27. And of course, we will be very happy to invite all of you for participation in the next COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, to share with you the knowledge, success stories, discuss with you, frankly, the challenges and the opportunity, and come together to a consensus and a roadmap for moving forward to protect our natural resources. And of course, one of the main solutions that we are looking to focus on, the natural-based solution, which have environmentally, economically, and the social impacts for our world. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and looking forward. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much indeed, and I will gratefully accept your offer, and I will see you in Egypt in November, okay? Thank you. I know you will host me beautifully, and it's a very, very welcoming country, as I found out previously. So thank you very much for setting us the framework and giving us the background, talking about various treaties, pledges, and commitments which have got us to this point, Dr. Sena. Now let's talk about what's happening here in the Republic of Korea, our hosts. What exactly are their plans? When the Korean International Cooperation Agency's climate change response came out, the midterm strategy, they looked at 2021 to 2025, and they set out 3 objectives: achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, supporting green recovery and climate change adaptation, and expanding green climate partnerships. And if you've been to any of the sessions where we've seen senior members of the Korean ministries which are targeting and focused on this area, you'll hear just how ambitious the plans are and how impressive they are, and just how much forest there is in Korea. I had no idea. I had no idea. So our next speaker will discuss and describe how forests as nature-based solutions feature in the Republic of Korea's enhanced climate change ambition, and also will describe the Republic of Korea's strategy for building effective partnerships to promote nature-based solutions based on sustainable forest management. So let's welcome Ambassador Hyung Kim, who is Deputy Minister for Climate Change of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency.
Dr. Ali Abusena, CEO of the Environmental Affairs Agency of Egypt, distinguished panelists, speakers, and ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the Korean Forest Service and the UNFAO for arranging this meaningful session as part of the 15th World Forestry Congress. Today, we are observing and feeling an increasing impact of climate change day by day, even in Korea, we are experiencing every year hotter summer and a very severe winter. Having committed to limiting the rise of global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century, we are seeking various means across the sectors to realize this goal. As part of such efforts, forests are being increasingly valued and given attention for its role in our fight against climate change. I believe it is very fitting that we have gathered today at this time to discuss ways forward in harnessing nature-based solutions from forests for climate change mitigation and adaptation. I would like to outline the important roles that forests play in the mitigation of and adaptation to climate change. First, forests can act as carbon sinks by removing CO2 from the atmosphere. The Paris Agreement also recognized the importance of forests as potential carbon sinks, as it states in Article 5.1 that the parties take actions to conserve and enhance sinks and reservoirs of greenhouse gases, including forests. In terms of adaptation, forests can help societies reduce vulnerabilities to climate change by providing a wide range of ecosystem services. For example, forests, mangroves in particular, can buffer and mitigate the damage from natural disasters such as landslides and storms that have been exacerbated by climate change. Also, forests are home to more than 80% of terrestrial species on Earth, many of which contribute to critical functions of the ecosystem, such as pollination and soil quality control. Moreover, non-timber forest products can provide safety nets for local communities when agricultural crops fail. According to IUCN, nature-based solutions can be described as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems that help address societal and environmental challenges effectively and adaptively. Forest is the place where nature-based solutions can work. Specific examples include creating new carbon sinks by such methods as afforestation, reforestation, and expansion of green urban spaces. Moreover, sustainable forest management actions like ensuring the healthy growth of trees can enhance the carbon removal capacity of forests. In addition, expanding protected areas and restoring damaged lands are also important nature-based solutions to enable a more resilient ecosystem. Putting such ideas into practice, there are a few points to consider. First, it is necessary to respect the rights of indigenous people and local communities whose livelihoods are directly related to forests. Their role in the sustainable use and management of forest resources is significant and needs to be supported. Secondly, finance for nature-based solutions from forests needs to be secured. In this respect, the Global Forest Finance Pledge signed at COP26 in Glasgow last year, and the LEAF Coalition formed at the Climate Summit April last year were meaningful steps forward to mobilize political will for forest finance. Now we should implement. We must focus on implementation of our commitments. And I hope we can see more progress and outcome at COP27 hosted by Egypt this year. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Korea is a country where approximately 63% of territorial land is covered with forest. With the national projects of afforestation that began in the 1970s, Korea has successfully created and restored its forests. But we are now facing new challenges, such as aging of forests and climate change. This year, mainly due to the climate change, we had the biggest, very disastrous wildfires. In an effort to address these issues, Korea included nature-based solutions from forests in its NDC by leveraging forests as carbon sinks. We will remove 25.5 million CO2 tons through forests by 2030. To achieve the target, Korea Forest Service plans to create new carbon sinks, for example, by expanding urban forests. Also, we plan to implement management practices that increase the removal capacity of the existing forests, especially by taking a holistic and circular approach to tree growth. Korea also plans to facilitate the use of domestic harvested wood products so that they can function as carbon stocks and help address the current problems of aging forests. In terms of adaptation, Korea has developed national adaptation plan every 5 years in order to minimize the negative impact of climate change on forests and strengthen climate resilience. In 2017, we established an integrated management system that oversees the occurrence of natural disasters, including wildfires, large-scale disease and pests, and landslides. As natural disasters tend to occur more frequently as a result of climate change, and in turn negatively affect the health of forests, new technology such as drones to enable monitoring in real time makes more accurate predictions possible. Another powerful nature-based solution is the connection and restoration of damaged or disconnected lands. Korea's first forest restoration plan aims to restore forests to a healthy condition over the 2020 to 2029 period, which also aligns with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Korea is also actively engaging other countries and international organizations. One of the most well-known activities include REDD+ in developing countries, which reduces emissions by preventing the deforestation and degradation of forests and supporting the sustainable management of forests. Korea has carried out pilot projects starting from 2012, mainly in the Mekong region in Southeast Asia, and plans to gradually diversify our partnership to include Latin American countries and African countries. We are also participating in the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism with FAO. Last but not least, we are continuing our active work under the Peace Forest Initiative, PFI, to ensure that neighboring countries or regions can build trust through transboundary cooperation in restoring degraded forests and lands, and thus contribute to the fight against climate change together. Korea's new administration, which will officially launch on May 10th next week, has expressed strong commitment to continue Korea's efforts for achieving carbon neutrality by 2050 and NDC by 2030. Forest is an integral part of these commitments. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, identifying and harnessing nature-based solutions from forest is an essential component not only in our journey to tackle climate change effectively, but also in biodiversity conservation and the maintenance of a stable livelihood of local communities. Therefore, I look forward to insightful discussion today among our panelists, speakers, and all of you joining both here and online. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for giving us those details. Really interesting to hear the extent to which Korea has included the role of forests in national adaptation plans and NDCs. And I'm delighted to hear that you'll be expanding urban forests, which I think are a great feature to have in any city or urban environment. Very underplayed, but they can do so much. Cooling temperatures in a city, for example. But what if you're a country, a state, that has plans, that has NDCs and NAPs, ambitions, targets, but needs help, needs assistance? Well, who do you go to? I suggest you go to the NDC partnership, which assists member countries to ramp up implementation of climate measures through resources, yes, resources, and indeed expertise. I'm delighted to say our third and final keynote speaker is the Global Director of the NDC Partnership, Pablo Vieira. Pablo is going to talk to us about the requests for support that he receives at the NDC partnerships, and will discuss the emerging trends in enhancing NDCs and balancing the focus between climate change mitigation and adaptation, that push and that pull that we've heard about so much during this Congress. He's not here in the room, but by the wonder of technology, we can feel his presence. Live right here, hopefully, on our screens. Pablo Vieira, please show yourself if you are here. I know that sounds slightly creepy.
I hope you can hear me well.
We can hear you, and even better, we can see you as well. Pablo,
perfect. And with
over
that great introduction, I think I'm done. So
no, you're not.
No.
Pablo wants to leave us wanting more, but we want a little bit more than that. Pablo, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I do have a few slides to present, so if I could get some help from the team, I can get started. So let me just say, Excellencies, dear colleagues, that it's a true pleasure to participate in this extremely important event. And I do regret not being able to be there with you physically today. But as you said very well, technology allows us today to share experiences and to be together virtually. So I would like to use this event as an opportunity to give you a short presentation on the role that nature and forest have played in countries' efforts to tackle climate change, and specifically focusing on their NDCs, how nature is reflected in nationally determined contributions of NDCs. And I will also share some insights from the work that the partnership is doing in more than 80 countries around the world, supporting both NDC implementation and updating. So next slide, please. Great. So the land use sector, as we've heard already today, is currently responsible for around a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions. And again, a global action on land use over the next decade will allow nature to be a significant part of the solution. In fact, it has been calculated that cost-effective natural climate solutions offer more than 35%, up to 40% of the mitigation needed between now and 2030 to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. So how were forest and land use reflected in the first round of NDCs in the lead up to Paris? Well, the forestry and land use change sector were generally given high importance on the first round of NDCs. 79% of NDCs referenced land use change, and forestry, or LULUCF, in mitigation contributions, and 58% referenced specific policies and measures for forestry. 59% of NDCs refer to forestry in adaptation plans, and 12% include specific adaptation measures for the forestry sector, with the most frequent references, policies, and measures being on afforestation and reforestation, forest management, and the reduction of deforestation. However, only a small number of NDCs in that first round detailed concrete measurable targets on the LULUCF sector, and most countries do not provide sufficient detail on financial requirements for the implementation of their commitments. This lack of concrete information leads to uncertainty regarding the global mitigation and adaptation impact of the NDCs in the forestry and land use sector. So after the first round of NDCs, it became clear that the overall ambition was not enough to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, and that even though forest and land use had a somewhat prominent role, the lack of specific targets, the deficient and limited available information, and the difficulties in mobilizing finance made it very challenging for countries to implement these commitments. Next, please. For the Paris Agreement's ultimate objective to be achieved, countries must deliver on its climate commitments, and they need to scale them up over time. The purpose of the NDC partnership is then to make each and every NDC count towards these global targets, one NDC cycle at a time, NDC cycles being every 5 years. We do so offering our member countries rapid and efficient access to international support in a vast variety of work areas to gradually transform those 5-year NDC cycles into a stepping stone for meeting their long-term sustainable development aspirations. Our collective aim is to provide developing countries with resources to transition from standalone NDCs to well-established and sustainable NDC processes that drive low-carbon and resilient planning and investment. Our diverse membership provides the right mix of resources to do that. We're talking about technical assistance, finance, and expertise across all dimensions of NDCs. Next, please. So after struggling to turn their first NDC commitments into actions, countries started preparing to update their NDCs in the lead up to COP26 in Glasgow, looking for opportunities to raise their ambition by adding new sectors, new gases, and by increasing specific targets for sectors they already had. Developing countries wanted to avoid rushing into the development of their new NDCs and were looking for support to avoid the challenges they faced during the first round of NDCs. Because of that, the NDC partnership supported 67 countries update their NDCs so that they could do a better job in having high-quality NDCs that were more realistic, that were implementable, and most importantly, more ambitious. And it was a great effort because all partnership supported countries enhanced the quality of their NDCs. All supported countries strengthened their NDC revision process. And as a result, all supported countries that submitted updated NDCs raised their mitigation and or adaptation ambition. And one of the key drivers of ambition were forest and land use. More than half of the countries that we supported had specific mitigation and adaptation requests related to forest and land use when they're updating their NDCs. Amongst the variety types of requests, we can see some trends. First one, a lot of technical assistance is still needed to identify opportunities to include specific actions and define specific targets in the updated NDCs to drive both ambition and mitigation with land use and forests. Countries understand the difficulties of establishing robust MRV systems and M&E systems, especially for land use, and they're requesting support for this. Countries need financial support and more private sector engagement in mobilizing finance for the implementation of these actions. And finally, capacity building and technical training are still fundamental for developing countries. As a result of the efforts of countries in the lead up to Glasgow, LULUCF became the second most represented sector in the second round of NDCs, just behind energy, appearing in 89% of all NDCs, up from 79% in the first round of NDCs. So countries did see an opportunity in land use and forests in terms of driving their ambition. So let me share a couple of examples on what we saw. Next. Countries leveraged ambition through more specific and quantitative targets. Panama, for example, integrated new forest targets with quantified mitigation impacts, specifically the restoration of 50,000 hectares of forest that could contribute to absorbing 2.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2050. Countries also specified funding sources for the implementation of their actions. Niger, for example, is promoting climate change resilient communities, ecosystems, and local economies with strong incentives. The targeted communities will benefit from assistance and performance-based climate resilient grants to carry out specific interventions. And countries enhanced stakeholder engagement in the process. The development of Papua New Guinea's LULUCF sectoral mitigation plans and corresponding implementation regulations involve extensive stakeholder consultation and technical training sessions with the aim to identify and prioritize subsectors, measures, and policies, and highlight the key components, actors, and their specific roles and responsibilities for the implementation of these regulations. Next, please. However, as you all know, despite the very important progress, we remain far from the Paris objectives. If we take into account updated NDCs and also the country commitments to reach net zero emissions by around 2050, analysis has shown that temperature rise could be kept to around 1.8 and 1.9 degrees. This demonstrates progress, but also demonstrates that more needs to be done. But most importantly, it demonstrates that current commitments need to be implemented as soon as possible. If we want to reach that 1.8, 1.9, we need to implement. We need to do more to raise ambition to get us to 1.5, but we also need to implement that. Next, please. This is why the NDC Partnership's main objective is to support NDC implementation. And we are currently supporting more than 80 developing countries around the world, with support from more than 150 partners that have effectively mobilized over the last 4 years more than $1 billion to support these efforts by developing countries. Of this, 52 countries have made specific adaptation and mitigation implementation requests associated with forest and land use, making LULUCF the third most frequent sector for which countries are requesting support. Most requests focus on MRV, M&E systems, finance and investments, capacity development, and nature-based solutions. Some examples of implementation activities for which we have received requests includes the use of forests to accelerate carbon sequestration in Burkina Faso, the improvement of data in the LULUCF sector for the National Transparency System in Dominican Republic, the design of restoration projects for forest landscape in Armenia, and the development of forest inventory protocols and standard methodologies in Pakistan. Next. But even though needs vary across regions, the main challenges countries face today for the successful implementation of their commitments is finance mobilization. This is especially true for forest and land use sector, where the NDC Partnership is working with 37 countries on the preparation of bankable projects and the mobilization of finance for these projects. These areas of request include examples such as the mobilization of $45 million for a cross-border program for a 5-year forest management program in Mali, the introduction of carbon accounting for estimation and quantification of carbon sequestration and development of linkages with carbon market mechanisms in afforestation projects in Pakistan, and the development of a domestic carbon market policy that will include reforestation and forest protection in the Philippines. Next, please. So clearly, a lot has been done and is being done, but a lot more needs to be done. And the NDC Partnership is here to improve the coordination of stakeholders and approaches to better support country needs. We focus on the mobilization of partners to respond to country requests, on supporting mobilization of finance at speed and scale for the implementation of their commitments, and we bring an approach that maximizes well-being, nature conservation, and social and economic gains, so that countries have a whole of society, whole of government approach to drive their sustainable development through the implementation of their climate commitments. But in order to succeed, we need to operate under a common framework that brings together different parallel processes, such as the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, the NAPs, and the CBD processes, so that governments and institutions can more effectively use the limited available resources to drive a more sustainable development. This is why it's so important to bring these different topics together in an event such as the World Forestry Congress, because this is a great opportunity to talk about climate change, nature-based solutions, development, economic and social gains, all in a single conversation. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm very happy to be here today with you.
Pablo, thank you very much indeed. It's a wonderful presentation. It's great to hear just how much interest there is among these countries for LULUCF. I'd never heard of that acronym before, but I'll be singing it all the way back to London on the long flight. LULUCF. Excellent, Pablo. Thank you very much. And I know you're going to be standing by for some comments later on in our schedule. But now we want to invite up our panelists, and they're going to join us on the stage there. First of all, Thomas Jambra, who is Manager MRV and REDD Plus programs at the Ghana Forestry Commission. Thomas, please come up on stage and take your seat. Not my seat, but further along, please. We have, I said not my seat. Valeria Alegria Cadena de Esparia, who is Director of Production and Sustainable Development, Ministry of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition from Ecuador. We're going to be joined virtually by Myrna Cunningham, Vice President of the Fund for Development of Indigenous Peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean from Nicaragua. And Alexandre Maybeck, who is from the Center for International Forestry Research and the International Council for Research in Agroforests. That's your panel. Please welcome them. Wonderful. We've got a lot to get through, so we're going to take a couple of rounds of questions before we open things up. So, Thomas, you're from what I would call Mother Ghana, because I'm also of a Ghanaian heritage, as I keep telling everybody in Korea. Now, I'm just wondering what Ghana's position is here on the implementation of forest sector actions and activities for the successful rollout of all REDD Plus programs and projects. So, share briefly, if you would, Ghana's experience in leveraging forests and trees for both adaptation and mitigation in the country's NDC and climate policy and action more broadly. So Ghana's experience initially.
May I?
You're on, yes, go.
Thank you, Harry, and for the question, and I associate myself with the speeches by the Honorable Ambassadors and the CEO on forest, what forest does for human beings. Specifically on Ghana, I'll look at the leveraging of forest and trees in NDCs and other policies in three broad ways. The first one is basically in the REDD Plus implementation. I'll give more highlights. The second is in forest plantations development, and the third is in forest governance and ecosystem tourism. On REDD Plus plantation, on REDD Plus implementation, Ghana has fast forward developed two key programs. One is called the Ghana Cocoa Forest REDD Plus program, which is mainly for the cocoa landscapes, and the other is the Ghana Share Landscape Emission Reductions program for the Savannah zone of Ghana, mainly for the share production systems where we have so many women, over 100,000 of women involved in that particular activity. Now, these two are contributing annually 2 million emission reductions from now to 2030 in Ghana's NDCs. And in our updated NDCs, as Pablo mentioned, we have these two programs rightly represented there. Now, beyond this, on adaptation, we find out that under the Cocoa REDD Plus program, we are looking at about over 20,000 farmers who, when we implement these activities, their yield will increase. We are targeting doubling their yield. Currently, it's around 450 kg per hectare, but the program looks to improve their yield in the next 5-6 years to about 800 thereabouts. But there are early signs of success, where currently we are measuring about 650 kg per hectare. That's their increase in their yields. Here, and the women groups in the up north, also we have this program with the private sector, and that's the key thing here. We are having partnerships, key partnerships in these two programs with the private sector, both at the national and the sub-national level. So the women groups, once we're able to increase their share production, we have the private sector ready to buy some of this share and increase the income levels of the women group. And this will increase their resilience at the end of the day. So it's not just the production or the planting of share, but there are also ready markets and collaboration with the private sector as well. That is basically under the Red Plus program. And one thing I want to mention is that under the forest plantation programs, for instance, government has 20,000 hectares as the annual target. Government establishes 10,000, and the private sector with incentives also establish the other 10,000. And here is a case we are able to resource the tree seedlings from communities. So communities have been trained. I remember the Honorable Deputy Minister mentioning, for instance, the local communities, and they are key here. Increasing their resilience is key here. So we've trained all these communities to now be producing the tree seedlings, where government buys from them, where the private sector also buy from them. So this helps to increase their resilience. The third theme, which I'm mentioning, is increasing community forest governance. So we've grouped these communities into what we call community resource management areas. We realize that when there's pressure on the forest reserves, we need to minimize the pressure. And how do we minimize the pressure? We need to group the community so that outside the reserves, they're able to take care of all of these and develop eco-tourism around them for sustainable financial sources. All of these to increase their resilience as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So it seems that in Ghana, it's not just abstract targets and very, very broad statements that are not being implemented. There is real tangible result on the ground, and as a result, the people are even more enthusiastic, which is great to see. So what about the position over in Ecuador? Valeria is here, Valeria Alegria Cadena de Esparilla, Director of Production and Sustainable Development at the Ministry of Environment there. So please share Ecuador's experience. Are you seeing early signs of success, as Thomas has described?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation. I feel really honored to be here in this panel. Okay, regarding to your question, I would like to start saying that Ecuador is a Latin American country responsible for 0.18% of the global emissions. However, we are a very vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. In compliance of our NDC, the government of Ecuador launched last year our implementation plan. This document outlines the implementation of mitigation actions and adaptation measures in the prioritized sector of our national climate change strategy. In order to have the necessary elements to report the compliance with these commitments, the Ministry of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition has started the process of monitoring compliance with NDC and its implementation plan. So to face these possible negative impacts related to climate change, the NDC prioritized 5 measures, of which one corresponds to the conditional scenario and 4 to the mixed scenario, conditional and unconditional. These measures seek, on the one hand, to strengthen the public policy on this sector by including the adaptation variable, and on the other, the implementation of actions in the territory. In that sense, measures are, first of all, improvement of public policy instruments for natural heritage that incorporate adaptation to climate change, increase in our forest area, remaining natural vegetation, cover and conserve or sustainability manage marine and coastal ecosystems, implementation of sustainable practice for the use of natural resources in areas of influence of areas under different conservation status, vulnerable to the effects of climate change, Also, establishment of corridors for the conservation and restoration of secondary forest and buffer zones to maintain landscape connectivity, reduce the impacts of climate change, and increase ecosystem resilience. And finally, creation and strengthening of capacities on climate change and natural heritage management in social, academic, research, and government actors. Regarding to mitigation, the country has 6 lines of action in its unconditional scenario. The first one is preserve the natural heritage, strengthen sustainable forest management, strengthen the restoration of the natural heritage, strengthen and increase the establishment and management of sustainable commercial forest plantation, strengthen forest control, and strengthen the national system protect areas. Regarding Pro Amazonia, the program refers to the linking of national efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions with the priority agendas of the countries and the policies of the productive sector to reduce the causes and agents of deforestation, as well as how to promote sustainable and integrate management of natural resources within the framework of the Red Plus Action Plan of Ecuador. Finally, I want to mention that the Ecuador Red Plus Action Plan aims to contribute to national efforts in order to reduce, monitor, report, and verify deforestation and forest degradation through conservation, sustainable forest management, and optimization of land uses to reduce pressures on forest.
Thank you very much indeed, Valeria, for giving us that detail. Serious planning for adaptation, mitigation, and tracking for real results. Thank you very much for giving us the picture there. We're now going to stay in Latin America because I can see Myrna Cunningham. She's there in glorious Technicolor with a very interesting symbol behind her, which don't take too long to describe, but I'm interested. And so Myrna is, Dr. Myrna Cunningham of Nicaragua is Vice President of the Fund for the Development of Indigenous Peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean, so FILAC. They've done a number of reports, the most recent one published last year on Indigenous peoples' forest governance, basically saying that Indigenous and tribal peoples are the best guardians of the forest. So my first question to you, Dr. Cunningham, tell us more about the role of securing Indigenous rights to forests and land in achieving global and national climate targets. And I believe Dr. Cunningham will speak in Spanish. Is that right? Over to you.
Well, I can speak in English. I can do my best. Thank you for the question. And this represents the cycle of life of one of the indigenous communities in Nicaragua.
Wonderful. I feel blessed already.
For our indigenous sister would say that the forest is a space where a sacred space, a space where you can breathe clear air, and it fills you with energy. So we can say that relation between indigenous peoples and forests is what we have been struggling for. And it's based on our worldview that we express through spirituality, as you can see on this, the harmony, unity, and the good use of the resources that really we consider are important for good life. Our territories, nature, are seen as spaces of life where we interrelate socially, spiritually, culturally, and productively. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, these are based on, we call them community-based solutions. And these are knowledge and practices that we have been adapting and using traditionally, but they are based on our customary law. And through this, applying our knowledge system, we build economy in our community based on reciprocity, and we grow together with nature, and we develop or together with nature on a sustainable way. So how have we done this? Because as we have said, we are the best protectors of nature. And this is not something that has not been measured. Different research have proven now that in the areas where we live as indigenous peoples is where we still have forests, where we still have biodiversity. And we would say that there are 4 reasons. And the first one is the cultural and traditional knowledge system of our people. Of course, we can see that there's a big difference between a producer that is non-indigenous and an indigenous producer in the forest. The second reason is collective right over our territories and our resources. And it has been proven that areas where we have control over our territories are those areas where we still have forests. Now, there are some external factors that have contributed to the protection of our forests, and we found that in that study, that research. And the first one is incentive the policy of forestry incentives. And this, when governments really recognize economic benefits to the forest dwellers, of course, there's more incentive to protect this. So there are different programs that have been implemented by some governments that contribute to the protection of forests. The other, this is a very controversial issue, are the protected areas. We have seen that protected areas can be a good way to protect forests, but traditionally, protected areas have been seen not related with the dwellers of the forest. So governments have seen protected areas as areas that they can administer, that they can control, and they have not respected the traditional inhabitants of those areas. So this is an area that we need to continue working towards the future. And of course, when we do believe in our experiences, the base solutions are those that are directed, protected by indigenous peoples. We also see that you cannot talk about nature-based solution if you do not have well-being for the humans that live in that area and for biodiversity. You need a balance between humans and biodiversity. Our experiences have proven that you can have nature-based solution that can enhance sustainability and quality of life of indigenous peoples. But one of the requirements is the security of land tenure and, of course, the control of indigenous peoples over those resources. So these are I would say, the reasons that why we have been recognized as the best protectors. But we need those requirements in place.
Very well said. Thank you very much indeed for the moment, Dr. Myrna Cunningham, giving us the traditional and, I suppose, indigenous perspective of Nicaragua. And before that, we heard the country examples of Ecuador and Ghana from senior officials there. We heard from the incoming COP27 presidency and our host, the Republic of Korea. And broadly, the position is quite positive, I think, what we're hearing this morning, apart from the challenges that we heard for the indigenous peoples in Nicaragua and beyond. So let me put a question to our final panelists at this point, Alexandre Maybeck from the Center for International Forestry Research. Tell us more about the obstacles, the main obstacles to enhancing the role of forests and trees in NDCs and NAPs, based on your most recent analyses, Alexandre.
Thank you very much. So First of all, just to precise that most of what I'm going to talk about is out of a collaboration between the FTA research program and FAO with the objective to support countries in improving the integration of forestries and agroforestry in their national adaptation plans and in the implementation of the NDCs. So first of all, I want to highlight one very positive point, that in the last round of NDCs, one of the biggest changes is the higher integration of forest and trees in adaptation. In the first round of NDCs, there were only 42% of countries that integrated forests and trees in their adaptation sector, and now it's above 68. And one of the reasons why I'm insisting on that is because for a very long time we spoke only about forest as a mitigation mean, and mitigation is something which is very global. You contribute to the general improvement of the situation. It's not necessarily very tangible for people on the ground. So the more you put the emphasis on adaptation, especially in a context where everybody's feeling the impact of climate change, the more it's closer to people. And one of the things that foresters are very different as compared to crop growers is they have a long-term perspective. So it also helps everybody thinking along. So these were for the positive points, because it's always nice to start by that. But as has been emphasized by Pablo Vera, there are a range of difficulties for the LULUCF sector in the NDCs. There is a need for more precision on MRVs globally, on indicators of mitigation and especially of adaptation. Because if you want to ask for funding, you need to be very concrete about what you can achieve. And if you want to achieve a result, you need to know what you're looking at. There is also a need for more specificity on what are the financial needs. I mean, for that measure, how much do you need? And also for technical support, and finally, cost-benefit analysis globally, because this is what helps to prioritize funding. Another area which is very important is that there is a need for more collaboration between sectors, more evidence, and more integration between the forest and tree sector and the other sectors. Because when you look at the NAPs, very often trees and forest-related measures focus on a single biophysical adaptation aspect. You shade crops, or you protect a city against sea level rise, but with little consideration to all the economic and social adaptation aspects, and especially the benefits. And because when you look across the board, one of the things that forestry brings is strong co-benefits between adaptation and mitigation, and strong co-benefits with other sustainable development goals. So there is really a need to be able to show qualitatively and ideally quantitatively all these co-benefits in order to help people prioritize forest and tree measures. So that's the first aspect. Then the second aspect, when you look in the NAPs, there are lots of measures. Oh, we need to plant trees. But what trees? What is the right tree for the right place and the right purpose, and the objectives of the people on the ground? That's the first thing that is often a bit missing. And the second one is, what do you need to be able to plant trees? What is the enabling environment in terms of land rights, of tree tenure, and what are the technical needs, seed systems, what are the financial needs? And you know, I remember when I was in France and I was coordinating the first adaptation plan in France, one of the first examples we had was the Korean adaptation plan. And I really remember the details with which, and here it was a positive impact of climate change. You can grow apple trees further north. Okay, but so you need the seed systems to make it possible. You need to create the value chains. You need to transform the fruit. So it's all these aspects that needs to be considered and for which you need to involve the economic actors and extension services, and both thinking about the inputs that are needed and the outputs that are.
Alexander, I'm going to pause you for just a second because I want to get some supplementary questions as we move into a second round before we wrap up a little bit later on. And still, I also want to leave a couple of minutes for a little bit of Q&A if we have time. You've given us some challenges. Tell us about some of the concrete recommendations you have to bolster the role of forests and trees in climate change adaptation. I mean, you've hinted at one or two in what you said in your first answer, but focus on that a bit more. Recommendations, concrete ones.
So I think that they're really, the first thing is that you need to have a kind of dual process in the way you think about adaptation of forests and trees. One is a proper dialogue, conversation, dialogue, evidence-based inside the sector, in the forestry sector, and in each tree value chain globally. So that's one thing. Then you need to organize an appropriate dialogue between the forestry sector and the other sectors that benefit from forestry for adaptation. The water sector, urban areas we had mentioned this morning, the energy sector, the most vulnerable populations, how you improve food security with trees. And then to come back, okay, you want to have trees to protect your watershed. How does the water sector can help support financially the forest sector to do it, and how the forest sector can implement the measure? So nature-based solutions, to a certain extent, requires a kind of dialogue between the nature stewards and the ones benefiting from the nature-based solutions. If you want indigenous people to be able to go on doing what they've done for centuries, you need to give them the means to do that, the rights, the recognition, to be able, and the protection they need, for instance.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Let me go back to Dr. Cunningham, who is on our screen there. So let's follow up on that point Alexandra made there then. So you and other Indigenous leaders, you've been really effective in elevating the critical importance of Indigenous rights to the center. Make sure you're not marginalized anymore. Tell us more about the strategy you've employed and the success you've had. Are you part of the dialogues that Alexandra says are really necessary?
Of course, we have been, I would say we have considered that the advocacy at the international level is important, but we address it as how Paulo said, we are in all the spaces because we look at the different processes as interrelated with the CBD, with climate change, adaptation, mitigation. Climate finance is an important area where we have been struggling to promote not only policies, but begin to see implementation. The second thing that we have done at the international level is to promote the creation of indigenous-led funds and funds that can channel resources to indigenous community, because one of the areas that we need to strengthen indigenous capacity is managing resources. We do not have resources. A research that was done last year was able to prove that only 1% of financing for forestry goes to indigenous communities. So we need to increase our capacity to receive those resources, but at the same time, we also need to build alliance with different actors that manages those resources. And some of the areas in which we have been trying to develop is our own institutions, our own organizations that can work on land tenure, for example, or can work on traditional knowledge system. And of course, we combine the 5 recommendations that we identify in that research: land security, reaffirmation of our culture and traditional knowledge system, and the respect and support our governance capacity, our own indigenous organizations, that we need them to be respected, but we also need them to be supported to become sustainable. And the other area that we have worked a lot is related with survival. How can we move from survival to economic development? How can we become partners of all of these projects and ideas that are being set out with the commitments? Because we cannot, as the women in the Amazon basin would say, we need the forest to survive, to live. So the economic management of the community forestry management is an area where we need more resources to go to small farmers, to indigenous communities, so we can also combine what we are doing, and at the same time, we can be part of development. And we do combine with the recognition of the services that we do. Red Plus have been mentioned, but we look at it at a more holistic approach.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Cunningham. We're whizzing through our panelists because we want to leave time for our opening speakers to give us some comments a little bit later on. And let's have a look. Yes, indeed, we'll be able to do that. And also, we've got Jessica Vega Ortega, who is going to give us some forward-looking comments. But just briefly, let's see if we can hear from, let's have a look, who else do we need to speak? Let us hear from, let me just see. No, in fact, let me bring up Jessica now. Then I'll go back to our panelists. Let me bring up Jessica now. Because I think, rather than put you on the end, let's put you in the middle of this panel. I want to hear from you. You can go up there, because I want you to give us a few minutes of your thoughts, proposals for the future, the youth, especially Indigenous youth, for promoting climate policy and action. Because your organization is called the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, and you are the co-chair. Over to you.
Yes, Duba di Quindo está ahí, está ahí. Saludos, hermanos y hermanas. Desde los diferentes procesos de los que soy parte, agradezco poder tomar la voz el día de hoy. Voy a dar unos segundos.
Yes, it is an honor to be here, ladies and gentlemen. May I have a few minutes to gather myself and gather my thoughts? I will be speaking in Spanish because I am facing the barrier of language here, and I want to show you that this language barrier can be overcome. Nature-based solutions are very important for the nature, and in particular, engaging youth in this area is very important for multiple sectors. Indigenous youths and climate actors must be encouraged to participate. Overall, we should be able to give a holistic approach. Social, economic, environmental issues must be addressed in a sustainable manner. So what we need to do next through this session is to make use of the knowledge gained from this session to address many of our challenges. At the COP meetings, youth should have a seat. Generating jobs, protecting our soil with a holistic vision is what we need. One of the main causes of land degradation is growing crops for food, but we cannot stop producing food. As of now, there are 10 projects underway for indigenous youths. Through the Latin American Youth Network and FELAP, we are engaging in these projects to restore the forest with the engagement of multiple generations, engaging in dialogue to restore forests. We spread knowledge. We contribute to mitigation. Therefore, youths must be given a seat in dialogue settings such as this. We must cooperate to protect the Mother Earth. This is not just a matter of carbons. It is a matter of the spirit, food, medicine. We are making great contributions, opening up a platform for dialogue, and with a sense of responsibility, we must continue our efforts to restore land and soil. We need children's participation. We need youth participation. Multiple generations must engage in efforts for land restoration. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent, Jessica. You left us wanting more, which is always a good sign. A very good, you can come to the... Yeah, why not? You must join us on the high table, please. Maybe you can even sit next to me. Right, we're into the last 10 or so minutes, and I want to hear from Valeria again with the Ecuador experience. Your country began the development of its national... Well, first of all, in fact, before you answer my question, I want you to respond to what Jessica said, just briefly, and then answer this. I mean, what is the role of forests and agroforestry in your country for adaptation and resilience? But first of all, a nod to what Jessica said.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Valeria.
Okay. I was surprised about Jessica's what Jessica said. I really like what you said. Okay, regarding to your question, as you know, we as a country, we are developing since 3 years ago, we are developing our National Adaptation Plan. And in this National Adaptation Plan, we include a sector, an important sector, which is the natural heritage. And in this sector includes forest as an essential role, for adaptation, policies, and action, not only because their ability to contribute to maintaining the resilience of population linked to them, but also because they provide relevant mitigation co-benefits, Forests play an important role in adapting to climate change in a country as vulnerable as Ecuador is, providing environmental services such as habitat areas, natural barrier against catastrophes and extreme weather events. So in summary, in Ecuador, the adaptation measures are being identified through a broader spectrum of typologies tailor-made at a local and sectorial level that consider the climate risk, communities, ecosystem service, focus on the most vulnerable people in the country, or prioritize vulnerable groups. We hope that this year, probably in August, we will have our first national adaptation plan. It will be ready as the first effort that we are going to have right here, our climate projections toward the next years and the study of risk in the 6 sectors that are prioritized in our first NDC.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Valeria. And final question in this part for Thomas in Ghana. It's been said that there deficits in forest monitoring. From the Ghanaian perspective, what advances in forest monitoring are being used to support NDC implementation? Give me some good news, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Henry. So generally, I would take it from two approaches. Generally, on the NDCs, it was mentioned earlier on the integration. We've launched what we call the Ghana Climate Ambitious Report Program, where we have integration with the various sectors within our NDC so that we can know whatever is happening within the various sectors. So forest sector, the industry and all that, then we can have the linkages. But specifically to your question on the forest, how we are undertaking the monitoring, it's good to have a baseline based on which you are going to measure whatever you need or the ambitions that you've projected in your NDC. So we have reference levels to guide us, serving as baselines to guide us. Two, we have strengthened institutional arrangements, mainly at the sub-national level, so that we have the communities, the private sector, the CSOs, the NGOs meeting periodically to compare notes and see how each one can contribute and what can be done at that sub-national level. The third one is the building of capacity of communities so that they are involved in the data collection. You know, they are always around and closer to the resource. So once you build their capacity, you're able to get better data going forward. And the last one I would want to add is that we are developing a web portal where we can put all forms of data from the various sector on that portal so that at every given time even if you are outside Ghana, you can just go in there and check whatever is ongoing at the moment. So I think these are the quick 4 things that we are currently doing. Thank you.
Active, open and transparent. Thank you very much. That's a very positive picture from Ghana. We're not going to have any time for Q&A, sadly, because time is against us. It's marching on. So I want to get some very brief closing remarks from our keynote speakers, reflecting on what they've heard in the past 45 minutes or so. Let's go virtual, first of all, to Pablo Vieira from the NDC Partnership. Pablo, I saw you nodding sagely at several points during the conversation. Why was that? Explain.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this invitation. Especially, I would like to thank the co-organizers of this very successful Forest Congress, the Korean Forest Service, and the FAO. And I enjoyed very much this conversation because I think that there are very critical elements that we heard that will allow us to understand better where we are, but also help us move forward in a better way. So the first key element is that I think everyone agrees that at this point, we both need to increase our ambition and accelerate the implementation of our commitments. And that we have in nature-based solutions in forests and land use a huge opportunity with probably more than 40% of the mitigation potential to achieve the Paris Agreement, but even more if we look at adaptation. So what we're seeing here is a huge opportunity in terms of adaptation potential, mitigation potential, social and economic gains, nature protection, well-being, and many other things. So it's a win-win-win-win-win-win solution that we really need to look into. But we're not doing enough. We're not really tapping into the potential because we have challenges, including capacity at the country level in the different governments, information, monitoring, MRV systems that are not fully functional. We have issues with analysis of that information, for example, in determining cost benefits, and of course, mobilization of finance. But finally, there's a way out, but a way out that requires a multi-sectoral approach, a multi-stakeholder approach, a multi-partner approach. We need to come together to be able to successfully move forward in implementing concrete actions on the ground that will allow us to achieve all that potential of nature-based solutions.
Thank you very much indeed, Pablo. Thank you very much, Pablo Vieira from the NDC Partnership. Let's bring things back inside the room. Talk to Ambassador Kim. I saw you've been nodding and you've been writing furiously. My God, I was so impressive. It reminded me of when I was doing my graduate studies. People just working away. And I was thinking, what is she writing? What is she writing? So please give us your closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. It was very, very interesting discussion, very useful discussion to hear various views from different countries, from initiatives, from civil society leaders, and youth as well.
Yes, indeed.
So I would like to emphasize 3 points. Number one, I think there is a broad consensus in the global community that forest and land use are an integral part of climate change mitigation and adaptation. That's why countries in their NDCs, in their adaptation plans, they include forest and land use as a key component to achieve their goals. And number two, but in focusing on implementation, we are facing challenges, particularly the challenges about mobilizing climate finance, focusing on forests and land use. So how to mobilize climate finance, particularly not only from the public money, but also from the private money, because we know that multinational companies, many private sector, they are interested in investing in forest and land use area as well in order to achieve their own carbon neutrality goal. Therefore, international organizations, countries, and civil societies, all relevant stakeholders must work together to prepare good bankable project proposals. And in that sense, I think the FAO, the NDC partnership, they can play a great role. And finally, when we are preparing bankable projects, we must consider the relevant stakeholders as an integral part. So women, indigenous people, youth, and community leaders, all of them, they must participate as major actors in the project so that the implementation can bring about a real impact. Thank you.
Tremendous. Thank you very much, Ambassador, Minister, indeed. And finally, we started off with the CEO of the Environmental Affairs Agency at the Ministry of Environment for the incoming COP27 presidency for the Arab Republic of Egypt, Ali Abou-Sena. And I know you're bursting with energy and you're going to send us away looking ahead to November this year. In Egypt. So please give us your closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the intervention from all the speakers, which give us actually a real overview about the needs that we can take it over to the COP27. I would like to emphasize that the COP27 it will be a COP for implementation. So we are looking for implementation. Egypt is nominated by Africa for this, for hosting the COP. So we would like to be really meeting the needs of most of the developing countries, and the needs has to be really discussed in a more transparent way in this event. So, however, I would like to highlight some of the very important views for the Egypt presidency. So first, we would like to highlight the importance of linking the CBD with the climate change. Egypt was the previous presidency for the CBD conventions. Based on the experience over the last 2-3 years, we were realizing that there is an importance to link the CBD with the climate change. They shouldn't be separated from each other. They have to be working in a very strong harmony. And this is a view of the Egyptian presidency, have been ensured by our president, His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, in the opening of the CBD conference in Egypt. So this is an importance. We'd like to work on it and try to bring all this convention together. The second issue that have been discussed many times about the finance. So here I would like to confirm the tasks that we got from the Galaxo COP26, that we have 3 main mandates that we have to work in the COP27. The first one, to start and design a program for collective finance. This is a very important task. We are taking it at the COP27 presidency. The second one, doubling adaptation. And this is something very important for developing country. We are all speaking about balance between mitigation and adaptation. In a country like Egypt, we are only contributing 0.1% of all the emissions. So we are a very affected country. So we are looking much for balanced finance for our countries to be able to continue for combating the climate change. The third thing that's very important, and the outcome from the Galaxo, that we have to set a procedure and a mechanism for monitoring the progress of the financing. So there will be a ministerial task force every 2 years to review the target of finance, if it's achieved or not, based on a transparency procedure. So all these tasks we are taking over in COP27, and I would like to conclude that we call it again, the slogan of this COP27 is the implementation. So we hope that we bring all countries together for a consensus, that we start real implementation on the ground, taking into consideration the basic needs, for example, indigenous people, that they would like to live, to work, to have income, and also at the same time, they keep the forest as the green lungs for our world. With this, I would like to thank you very much for this invitation, the Republic of Korea for hosting this very important Congress, and we believe it is a roadmap and a step for COP27, and until we see you all this year in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much.
Sharm el-Sheikh. Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Ali Abulsina, Ambassador Kim, Pablo Vieira, all of our speakers, our panelists. It's a wonderful session. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful day. Our COP implementation. See you in Sharm el-Sheikh. But not before we spend 3 more days here in Seoul. Thank you.